I'm Whitney.
I'm Mindy.
And I'm Deb.
We're three best friends who love nerdy things.
Well, some people think we're nerdy, but we think we're pretty awesome.
This is Our Nerdiest Thing.
Hello, fellow nerds, and welcome to Our Nerdiest Thing. Today, we are discussing The Fall of the House of Usher, Episode 5, The Telltale Heart, and Edgar Allan Poe's short story of the same name. Before we get into it, Deb, will you please share our nerdiest cocktail? I realized I was like making faces and like, hey guys.
I never know what to say when you're that enthusiastic. Whitney,
I'm just so excited to talk about it.
About this cocktail. So tonight's drink is named Ticking Time Bomb, and I keep wanting to go ticking bomb. It's themed after badly covering up your mistakes, which I think she actually covered it up pretty well. But this drink pairs well with making your evil dad cry. And he goes, she's quite dead.
That made me laugh. Yeah.
Trying to find that dang noise and a supernatural ability to get away with crimes. And it may cause a pretty fucking epic breakup with your partner. So you all, it's a blueberry vodka sour. It's really, really yummy. Mm-hmm. You can find the recipe at ournerdiestthing.com or on our Instagram page at Our Nerdiest Thing. Sorry, I'm trying to match Whitney's vibe. And I'm tired again. Go.
Well, friends, now it's time for our nerdy and dirty recap, where I will give a not timed recap of the episode and also the Edgar Allan Poe story. And today, it's also going to include my deep dive, because my deep dive is about The Telltale Heart. I'm realizing I need to be more specific.
The most
the story.
famous
I would
Poe
say.
story.
I think probably
That and the Raven.
That and the Raven are those are the ones that are usually in like high school curriculum.
And
those are the ones I taught.
they're recognizable. They're very talked about.
Yeah. So let's talk about the Poe story first. So this is actually my favorite Edgar Allan Poe story, and I really enjoyed teaching it. So this is just a quick summary, and then in a couple of minutes I'll go into a little bit more detail. So this is the basics of the Telltale Heart. Our narrator tells us he's not crazy, which is always a great start. And he has superhuman hearing. So he has an old man roommate who had what the narrator called a vulture eye, a blue eye with some kind of film over it. So it was like diseased or blinded in one eye, cataract, something like that. Yeah,
Poor
sure.
guy, leave him alone.
I know, right? So the narrator is so freaked out by this eye that he decides he needs to kill the old man to get rid of it. So for a whole week, every night at midnight, the narrator sneaks into the old man's room while he sleeps and just watches him like a creeper.
Definitely not crazy.
For real. So the old man doesn't wake up, and then he would shine a little bit of a lantern light, because remember, this is the 1800s. He would shine a little bit of a lantern light onto the blue eye, but couldn't go through with killing the old man because the eye was always closed, and like that's the motivation that he needs. But one night, the old man does wake up. The narrator sees the blue eye, goes into a rage, and smothers the old man with the bed, and then buries his body in the floorboards.
Like, why couldn't he use a pillow? Why do you have to use the whole mattress? And you know,
it's a great question.
A duck feather mattress. That shit was not light.
It was like very
you had to
heavy.
Like flip that guy off of there,
and then flip the mattress over top of him. Yeah. That's some rage energy there, some adrenaline. So the next morning, the police show up because someone reported hearing a shriek in the night. And our narrator is so confident that he has gotten away with murder, he takes the police for a tour of his house and the old man's room and sets up chairs for them to chit-chat in the old man's room and sits himself right on top of where the body is. But his supersonic awesome hearing starts to hear the old man's heart beating. The narrator gets more and more agitated about this until he finally pretty much just loses it and outs himself as murdering the old man and tells the police to pry open the floorboards. And that's the end of that short story.
It's like last week. What I've learned from both of these stories is when the police come, don't have them sit down in the room where the dead body is.
Don't get overly confident.
Well,
yes.
Yeah, they're like just arrogant. And I've noticed that too. And it definitely ties in with, I think, Victorine, who thinks like she is the shit.
Untouchable.
You know? Yeah.
For sure. So in the Usher episode, every time I say that, that's what I want to do. So in the episode, we focus very heavily on Victorine, but we still get a smattering of story for everybody else. So we see the group funeral for Perry, Leo, and Camille, and we get a quick view of their moms that no one talks to and acts like they're not there. We see Tamerlane tell her husband Bill that she selected him to be a romantic partner for her.
That was not nice.
I know, right? She thought that he would be the best option for her business as spokesperson, not because she has any like care or feelings for him. We see 1970s Roderick and Madeline joining forces with August fist to try to take down Fortunato, and we get a really disgusting scene with Rufus being a creep and a misogynist to Madeline while she's pitching an idea to him about computers. And we see New Year's Eve, Madeline and Roderick taking turns being seen at the Raven Bar, and Verna gives off some real Crowley vibes, asking Madeline...
I thought you were going to say real lesbian vibes.
Well, that too, but I got more Crowley vibes because she asks Madeline what she wants from life, and after Madeline answers, she kisses her. And I was like, sealing it with a kiss.
Oh, hey, I didn't catch that.
That's what made me think about Crowley.
Crossroads deal.
Exactly. So then we see Freddie and Lenore preparing their home for Morel to recover at home instead of the hospital. And Freddie is definitely giving off, I'm going to murder her when she gets here vibes.
Yeah, he went very quickly from should I trust her? And I really want to find out that she's really good-hearted.
In denial.
And then all of a sudden it's like, bitch gonna die.
Yeah, I was like, oh, this is where we're going.
Denial phase.
And he's in the anger. Yeah, the anger phase for sure. So definitely that's going to be a thing that happens, I'm predicting. And one of my theories in this episode was proven correct. When August confesses to Roderick, there was no informant. And I was like, yes!
I was a little irritated that you figured that out.
I was very happy about that. I was like, I knew it. A lot of the other stuff I thought was going to happen was not correct. So I will take that one win. And then we go to Victorine. So we have already seen that Verna is acting as a patient, that Victorine is trying to get to be basically the first human test subject for her heart device. And in this episode, we find out Victorine has been falsifying documents and paperwork to get the human trial approved and has used her doctor girlfriend Alessandra's signature on those fraudulent documents, which ironically is the exact same thing that happened to Roderick. Yeah. And now she's doing it too.
I actually, as you were saying that, I was like, oh.
Yeah, it's connection. Like the exact same thing, right? History repeats itself. So they fight and break up in a very unsuspicious way as Victorine goes about her merry business. She keeps hearing a constant clicking noise, and we see her interact with Madeline, Verna, and Roderick when Roderick goes to check on the human trial to go to Victorine's house and is basically trying to tell her why this is so important to him. Like, I've got this diagnosis, and she's not listening. And it's like, do you hear that? Do you hear that? And so she turns music off, and he's like, actually, yeah, I do hear that. And then Victorine has a flashback to her breakup fight with Alessandra, where we discover she accidentally on purpose killed Alessandra by throwing something heavy and hitting her in the head. And she almost does the right thing and dials 911, but doesn't actually call 911, and then just decides not to and watches her bleed out and die. And while that flashback is happening, Roderick is wandering around to find the source of the noise and finds poor Alessandra's body opened up with the heart device keeping her heart beating. And Roderick actually gets really emotional, which I have a lot of questions about why he got really emotional. And Victorine stabs herself in the heart and dies. It was pretty crazy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But that was the end. I will say, when he does look at her and he goes, she's quite dead. It's very moving.
It really,
because it's very, instead of him going, what the fuck did you do?
Yeah.
I mean, I think that he knows she has ruined everything when it comes to that trial now.
Yeah. Yeah. Everything for him.
He's fucked.
Yep. Yeah. There's nothing that anybody's going to do. So I don't think
he's sad about Allie or sad about Victorine. I think he's sad that his options are out.
I also think he was a little nervous and scared. You don't know when somebody's acting like that, what's going to set them off, right? And what they're going to do.
Can I just say, I almost put as my least favorite thing in this episode is the fact that the woman that plays Victorine has Kristen Stewart disease and can not close her fucking mouth.
You are so right.
It drives me
that's
nuts.
Funny. That's really funny. I hadn't put that together, but you are correct. That is a thing that is happening. So that brings me to my deep dive this week, all about Edgar Allan Poe's The Telltale Heart. So I set the stage for this last week when I talked about unreliable talk because that's my favorite part of the story. So if you didn't listen to last week's episode, go listen to it because we talk about unreliable narrators. So the narrator in The Telltale Heart is completely unreliable. And since we're only getting the story from the narrator's point of view, there is a lot of room for interpretation. And that's why I love that story so much. So The Telltale Heart is one of The Telltale Heart. I feel like I just said telltale. The Telltale Heart is one of Poe's shortest short stories and is heavily focused on paranoia and mental deterioration. So our narrator is hypersensitive, both in his claims of having super hearing, hypersensitive hearing, and how he experiences the old man's eye, calling it evil and having it drive him to murder somebody because he doesn't want to look at it.
It sounds like our narrator may have some stimulation issues, some sensory issues he needs to work through.
I think
Go to therapy, bud.
That is true. Although, to be fair, in the 1800s, they wouldn't have known what that was. That would have just been like insanity. And his nervousness at the beginning of the story explaining what happened is kind of like a heightened nervousness. So for the narrator, from his point of view, these are signs that he is sane, where for everybody else, they're signs of his insanity. So he's not in reality with all the rest of us seeing things the way that we see them.
So you're telling me Peter Parker is actually insane?
I think he might be a little bit.
He might be.
He is half spider, half man. So.
He does have,
or part spider, most man.
White jizz-like material coming out of his hand all the time.
He gets the Peter tingles. So, To start off, a quick list of all the signs that our narrator is unreliable. Number 1 starts the story telling us that he knows we think he's crazy. Well, sir, there's a reason for that. Number 2.
We do.
Yeah, right. He mentions that he has a disease that didn't destroy his senses, but sharpened them, especially his hearing. And I'm like, okay. And that's all the information we get about that. So I'd like to know what that disease was and how it might have affected your brain. Number 3, he says he can hear all things in heaven and on earth. That's weird.
Almost like vascular dementia.
It is.
Like he's having hallucinations and hearing voices.
Yeah.
Good job, man.
Mm-hmm. Very well. Golf claps all around. Good job, Mindy. He also tells the reader, the listener, that he decided to kill his roommate kind of randomly. He says specifically that there was no passion and no real purpose. And then after telling us that he had no passion and no purpose for wanting to kill him, then he says, oh yeah, it was his eye. So it's like he realizes as he's explaining it, this doesn't sound good. I need to come up with a reason. But the best reason he could come up with is a weird eye, which is not a good reason. Right? And he must think it's convincing or he wouldn't have said it.
Well, if that had been a woman, it would have been a witch.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
And that's the truth. If the woman had the weird eye, she would have been a witch too.
He wouldn't have gotten in trouble for killing the witch.
Well, yeah, that's true. So he does kill the old man in a rage after telling us that he had no passion about wanting to kill the old man. And then finally, he says he can hear the old man's heart beating, both before he kills the old man and after the old man is certainly dead. And so, that's not normal. So there we go. So we've got a pretty good indication here. Something is not right with our narrator, which means that every single thing he tells us needs to be questioned. So he says multiple times how skilled he was, how quiet, how stealthy, how he was so good at covering up his plan to murder by acting friendly and normal, that the old man didn't suspect a thing, that he was covering it up so well when the police got there. But why would we believe any of that? So I like to picture the old man being like, this guy's going to fucking kill me like every single night and being like totally freaked out about it.
What are they to each other? I know they're roommates, but like, it just seems like a weird situation.
It is kind of, but I don't know. Maybe that's something they did back in the 1800s. I don't know.
Maybe he was his caretaker.
Yeah, like room and board or something.
Yeah.
I'm not really sure. So my favorite part of this unreliable narrator is one that might be easy to overlook, that my high schoolers, when we taught this, I always really enjoyed pointing this out to them. So the image of the narrator sitting around with the police trying to act normal when he's really freaking out is very funny to me. So if you think about what he's saying, he says that he is yelling and cursing and ranting and raving. And he says that the police are just sitting there pleasantly without a care in the world and just smile at him. And I'm just like, but think about from the police officer's perspective, this guy is like completely losing it.
They're like, play it cool and he's going to
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And like he plays it off like they didn't notice anything weird. And I'm like, yeah, they definitely did. Like they definitely think that you're a weirdo. So that brings me back to the show and to Roderick as our unreliable narrator, as we talked about last week. He is also sitting in conversation with an authority, not a police, but August is an authority figure, right? He is sitting around at what I'm going to assume is some kind of scene of a crime in that dilapidated childhood home, right? Mm-hmm. And he is also trying to keep his crap together as he is constantly hallucinating and seeing ghost specters of his dead children and visions of their actual deaths.
But again, we don't know if Verna is actually making him see them or not.
Right. He is seeing them.
Or even if Verna's real.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. He is seeing things, but we don't know what is actually happening, why he is seeing things. Right. And August doesn't know that any of that is going on. He just sees random outbursts and is like, what is happening? Which is exactly what's happening in the story, The Telltale Heart. Right. So August is just watching Roderick fall apart and trying to figure out what's going on. And he's basically having the same experience that we as readers have with the unreliable narrator. He's seeing a lot of signs and signals that something is not right with Roderick, and he knows about this diagnosis now of vascular dementia. So he is going to have to filter through every single detail that Roderick is telling him and has already told him about what has been happening, and really question if what Roderick is saying is accurate at all. So this is the only information that August has to go on, but he can't trust it and has to question it. So just like I keep questioning as the viewer, is any of what I'm watching real, or is this all just like the ravings of a lunatic, which is what the Telltale Heart is all about, right? So one last connection I wanted to make is just to point out that in the Telltale Heart story, the narrator sees the old man as two separate entities. There's the old man that the narrator loves, and then the I that he's afraid of and thinks is evil and is like terrified of. For him, those are like two completely different things. But what the narrator is missing is that the I is part of the old man. You can't separate them out into two different entities, right? But it seems to me that Roderick and every other Usher in this show is doing that exact same thing with the people in their lives. They're separating out things that somebody can do for them, especially sexually, it seems. And that is like a separate entity from the person themselves. And so they are callous and careless to the people in general while taking the one thing that they want, keeping them separate, which I just thought was interesting. So part of the inhumanness of the Usher family is this compartmentalizing, using people for what they want or what they think they need, and then just discarding the rest of them, which is what they're doing, which is exactly what Victorine did with Alessandra in this whole episode. So that's just, you know, Miss Weaver's classroom once again. But that's it.
Miss Weaver's classroom. Class dismissed.
I almost started singing the Reading Rainbow theme song. But I will spare us all. But yeah, that's the Telltale Heart, the story, a little bit of a deep dive, and this episode, which brings us to our nerdiest vocabulary. Mindy, will you please share?
I will. And we're going to look first at Victorine. The character name comes from a Poe story called The Premature Burial, which I think might be a little bit of a throwback to the mom as well.
I'm talking about The Premature Burial a little bit later.
Good. So you'll hear more about this later. But basically, the character is Mademoiselle Victorine Lafourcade, and she is buried alive by her abusive husband and then dug back up by her lover. So happy ending? Question mark.
I don't know. That's a lot of trauma.
Weird. Yeah. So I really thought I would find a lot on her and like how it all like kind of went together, but I didn't find as much on her as I did for Allie, her girlfriend. It's short for Alessandra, and that character name comes from an unfinished play that Poe wrote because I guess he thought he could do that. It was called Polition, and it was based on actually a true story that took place in good old Kentucky.
Oh
no.
So this was called the Beecham Sharp tragedy, and it's sometimes called the Kentucky tragedy. And it starts with a lawyer named Jeroboam O. Beecham, who admired and looked up to this Kentucky legislator named Solomon P. Sharp. And later he learned that Sharp allegedly had an illegitimate child with a lady named Anna Cook. The child was stillborn, and Sharp denied paternity.
Of course.
But according to the legend of this Kentucky tragedy, Beecham and Cook, the lady, struck up a relationship, and she agreed to marry him on one condition, that he avenge her honor by killing Mr. Sharp.
Oh, no.
So, several months after they got married, Mr. Beecham waited for Mr. Sharp to return to his home, where he stabbed and killed him.
Oh, my.
Yes.
I hate it when that happens.
I know. So, Beecham was sentenced to hang for the crime, but before they even took him to the gallows, Anna Cook, who I guess really loved him, kept coming to him in the prison, and they kept trying to commit suicide together. So they attempted a double suicide by dagger finally. And he was barely hanging on, and they dragged him to the gallows so that he would actually die of the gallows and not the stab wound.
No, motherfucker.
That seems petty.
Yeah.
Unnecessary.
It's like his high school rival. No, you are dying out here.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seems real. I mean, we are Kentucky, but whatever.
We are Kentucky.
So Anna, though, actually did die of her stab wounds later. But this all comes full circle to Alessandra and Victorine's double death, as in Poe's play. The Anna character is called Alessandra.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So,
that is interesting.
yeah, I liked that little tie-in.
Yeah, Victorine does
I
kill both
tried
people.
to read the play. It was awful.
hence the not
Hence
finished
the
part.
unfinished part. He was like,
Unfinished,
I
never
just
heard of
can't
it.
fucking do this.
I'll come back to this one later.
Yeah.
Let me write the Telltale Heart first. Well, thank you so
There's
much.
this Raven
Wendy.
I've been wanting to write about.
Yeah,
Maybe I'll
I'm
do
gonna,
that.
I'm gonna do that instead. Well, that brings us, finally brings us to the actual episode. Let's get started with our favorite moment, our favorite twist. Deb, you go first.
Sure. I adore the cinematography that was used when Roderick thinks he can save everyone by killing himself.
Yeah,
So he's
that was cool.
contemplating suicide and he can't decide if he wants to overdose on Ligadone, if he wants to impale himself with an ancient artifact, which only a rich white guy would be like, I think I'm going to do it with this really old knife.
Yeah,
This
that's
one
even
that
an
shows
option.
how rich it is.
Yeah.
Or he could jump from 70 floors up, and so it shows what it would look like if he jumped. And it was just really beautifully done.
That was really cool.
And I hate to say that about a suicide attempt, but it was just shot beautifully.
Yeah, it was a cool scene. Mindy, what about you?
Well, actually, I have two. One of them is actually a shout out to Victorine, who I hate. We all know. But I love it when they're in that bar and she leaves and her bodyguard starts to follow her and she goes, "Oh, fuck off, Ray-Bans."
Yeah.
You know what, though? She
That made
was
me
good
laugh.
with the one-liners because
She
when
was, yeah.
Allie's dying and the security guard's banging on the door, she's like, "You've never heard someone get eaten out before?"
I know.
And
I
I'm
was
like,
like,
okay,
oh my
that's
gosh.
seriously fucked up.
I'm like, all of a sudden she's funny. Like,
Quick on her
maybe
feet under
it's probably
stress.
'cause she
Right.
was crazy. But
It's concerning to me that she thought of that so quickly. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But she essentially was saying he was like a bigot for listening in while,
Yeah.
and a perv. Yeah. But my actual really favorite moment is when Madeline calls Roderick out for having too many kids with random women and insinuates that he had sex with Verna and now has another offspring running around that's psychotic.
Yeah.
I wrote it down in my notes, but what does she call him? Like a dad bag or something like that?
Oh, I didn't
can't
write it
remember.
down.
Yeah, I'll have to put it in the show notes because I cracked up laughing.
Yeah, that was actually my favorite moment too.
Yeah.
But kind of for a different reason. So we talked last time how Roderick and Madeline both recognize Verna as like that's the bartender, that looks like the bartender. And so now we're seeing what they're doing with that information. And I just thought it was really interesting that Madeline has no like supernatural concept of like, it's the bartender, right?
Yeah.
She's like, no, you had sex with the bartender.
Yeah.
And now she's got a mini-me daughter who's trying to kill all your
Yes.
kids, right? I just thought that was a really interesting like twist on that. But Roderick, to me, did not seem to be on board with that, in agreement with that. He just kind of like sits there and lets her talk. But I think he's putting together that something like supernatural is happening, but he is all alone with that thought, it seems like, which I thought was an interesting concept because it adds to his own questioning of his sanity and like what's real and what's not real. And I feel like the actor is showing that he's like, no, I think that is the bartender, but like, is it the bartender? Do I think it's the bartender because I have this dementia?
Right.
Or is it even possible? Like, I just think that's an interesting take
Yeah.
on
Well, and again,
him questioning everything,
right.
you know?
Him being the unreliable narrator, and we're essentially seeing everything through his eyes.
Yeah.
You really don't even know as the viewer if the pictures that Madeline are showing him are what they really look like.
Right. As he's seeing what
True.
she, just like, I think it was last episode when Tammy was seeing Verna in
Right.
Bill's workout
Yes.
video and he's like, she wasn't there, right? Like that could very much be happening.
Poor Bill, man.
I know. He
Yeah.
got a raw
We're
deal.
going to see him
He
more
did.
next episode, but man, he seems like a nice guy.
I know.
Which, I mean, I don't know if he is, but he seems like he
He's
is.
better than everybody else on the show,
Yeah,
it
that's
seems like. At least what we've seen so far.
Yeah.
What about a least favorite moment?
Mindy, I want to hear yours.
Well, I started to write when Freddie throws his privilege in the doctor's face. I thought that was really icky.
Yeah.
But what gave me the true ick was when Rufus basically gaslit Madeline. He was asking her how she takes her coffee in the morning and then basically tells her she's just a pretty face, goes on to say that her mom was a slut and that Madeline humiliates herself, so it's okay if he humiliates her.
Yep.
And then he basically invites her to sleep her way to the top.
Yeah.
He is just nasty
Yeah,
and
he's
disgusting.
gross. He's like, use your body.
Yeah.
That's all you have. That's all you're good for.
and
right?
you know damn well he didn't understand a thing she was telling him about computers.
No, because he's
dumb.
an idiot.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. That just made me think, did you guys see the Nike Super Bowl commercial about girls in sports?
I did not
Women
watch,
in
I don't
sports.
watch the
anything to
Super
do with the
Bowl.
Super Bowl.
You should look up the Nike commercial. It was really good. I liked it a lot.
Okay.
It was like, basically, they were saying all the things that people are going to say about you as a woman. And the whole thing is you can't win no matter what you do, so win. And I was like,
that.
Yeah. I was like,
get it, girl.
I loved that. But that scene makes me think of that.
It was so disgusting.
Yeah. I didn't like that. I thought about that for my least favorite moment, but I ended up picking just the overall murderer vibes that I'm getting from Freddie. Which just last week, I know I said, like, I felt kind of bad for him. And I knew that wasn't going to last, but I thought maybe it would last more than one episode. But, definitely he seems to have gone from confusion, denial to betrayal and anger with the burner phone, the fact that she was at Perry's party, like what she's been doing behind his back. And he's got all these questions that she can't answer, right?
Yeah.
Or that he wouldn't believe even if she could, I'm sure. So when Lenore says they're talking about getting their house ready for Maury to come home, and Lenore says, who wants to watch their favorite flower die slowly in a vase? And I thought, oh no.
Well, did you notice when they asked Maury if she wants to go home, she blinks no.
Yeah, she says no more than once.
Please don't send me home with him.
Yep.
Yeah, she knows what's coming.
Yeah, I feel bad for her. I feel like she has suffered enough.
Right.
Yeah.
She just wanted to get her freak on.
Yeah.
And she deserved to be.
She didn't technically do anything.
She didn't do anything. She just went to the party.
Yeah.
I thought she was a little.
And I thought she was leaving. I feel bad for her.
Yeah.
Like I feel like
she was trying to.
I feel like she got halfway across the room and just like didn't walk fast enough or something.
Right.
But
Yeah.
anyway, that's my least favorite moment.
Well,
what about you, Deb?
We know that Mike Flanagan loves a good like body gore scream, right?
Yeah.
He does it in every show. So in The Haunting of Hill House, a ghost portrays that in the very first episode, which I know you haven't seen yet, Whitney, so I don't want to go into too many details about that.
It's scary.
In Midnight Mass, Erin is like the most amazing scream queen when she and Riley are on the boat.
Yeah.
And then in this episode, like Mike Flanagan scared the shit out of me when Augie morphs into Victorine and she starts screaming. And it's that same screaming sound he does in every single one. It gets me every time. And I should not be watching this show when it's dark out. Like, I don't know how light's going to save me. But
It does make you feel better,
I know.
though.
I was watching it at night and I was like, I'm scared. I don't like it.
Let's talk about our biggest revelation. And I can go first because I would like to gloat a little bit more that I was correct in my theory that there was no family informant. Oh, Whitney, you did it.
Isn't that technically perjury?
I thought about that. I mean, it's definitely not
Ethical.
okay. Yeah, it's definitely not a good and not a wise
you would think
choice.
the judge would have to, like, he would have to at least tell the judge.
I mean, I guess.
You can't keep, like, in a court of law in the United States, you can't keep things, like, secret like that. Like, that's only...
Like basic discovery.
And you're really supposed to...
tell the prosecution.
Yeah,
like,
I mean, you're supposed to, like,
share
identify
evidence.
all your...
And he says it's for their own safety, but I think the judge would need to know.
I agree.
I feel like that too, but I don't know. Maybe we'll find out more about that, more details. But I do really like how that shows August's character evolution, just like we've been seeing how Roderick was different, you know, in the 70s and 80s.
I do love how Roderick was like, ooh, Augie, you sneaky, sneaky
He said,
bastard.
he was like, you got off your high horse and came down in the mud with us. And I was like, that's actually a really good point because that's true. And it definitely seems like 1970s, 1980s August would never have done that.
No,
right?
he would not have.
So I did enjoy that reveal as a character choice, but I was also like, I knew it. But again, I was not correct about many other things in this episode. So, Mindy, what was
the
your
first time you've ever been able to say that, too. Normally you got it all.
Mindy, what was your biggest revelation?
That was mine, that there was never an informant. And also that Victorine killed Allie. I did watch this before, I promise. I just did not remember these,
like how it happened.
These aren't even little things, like they're big plot points, right?
I will say though, I kind of wish when I had watched this the first time it wasn't based off Poe, because knowing it was Telltale Heart, I knew that she had killed Allie because they they black screened away from the throw of the vase or whatever.
They showed too much that there was a throw,
right? And so knowing it was the Telltale Heart, I was like, oh, she killed her. But if I hadn't known that, I think it would have been like a really crazy twist.
A big twist.
Yeah.
It was kind of a bummer for
Speaking
Alice
of
Usher.
a little bit of foreshadowing from Camille's episode, remember when we were talking about how everybody was talking about how she would chop up all the monkey parts and take them out her bag?
Yeah.
That's what he does in the Telltale Heart. He chops up all the parts and he puts them in different, like he chops them up first.
Oh.
Ew.
Oh, I don't remember that.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. He has to chop them up to fit them under the floorboards.
Yeah.
Oh, I think my brain was like, no.
He just took out 6'2" of the floor.
Yeah, well, yeah, maybe the floorboards were bigger back then. I don't know.
Yeah. I thought that was an interesting throwback.
Yeah,
that tied
that's a
in
good
with the
point.
story. That
I'm
was not
looking-
my favorite tie-in.
I'm
would
looking
not.
at my floorboards, and I think they're about 6 inches wide. So you could get a leg down in there, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe he was an emaciated person. Don't know.
With an eye like that, probably. So my biggest revelation is that the Telltale Heart is actually inspired by a real story.
Ooh.
And it's based off the murder of Joseph White, who lived in Salem, Massachusetts. And the reason it's based off his story is because Daniel Webster, who happened to be a special prosecutor on the case, was quoted to say, "The secret which the murderer possesses soon comes to possess him. It overcomes him. He feels it beating in his heart, rising to his throat, and demanding disclosure. He thinks the whole world sees it in his face, reads it in his eyes, and almost hears its working in the very silence of his thoughts. It has become his master."
Ooh.
Isn't that awesome? So as it turns out, 12 of Poe's stories are based off real life events.
I did not know that.
I didn't know that either.
So I'm not going to list all of them here, but I'll cover a few, and then we have a great article linked in the show notes for the listeners if you want to go read more. So we know that Edgar Allan Poe was terrified of being alive, and this is where the story of the premature burial comes in. And this story actually heightened the public's legitimate fears of waking up in a coffin, right?
Yeah.
Because, and we talked about this a few episodes ago about how people were getting buried alive all the time back then.
Yeah.
So his story was actually based off a patent that Christian Henry Eisenbrandt created for a life-preserving coffin that would spring open with the slightest movement of the occupant. I'm not sure how it would open if the coffin
I was
under the
just
ground.
the
thinking
ground,
that.
yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, it was a patent. Nothing ever came
Well.
out. But you know, they were so worried that like he's like, it'll just spring open if you start moving. But also, doesn't the dead body move and stuff?
I mean, like the gases
It
and
does,
stuff.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, even after you're embalmed, does the body move?
Ooh, I don't know about that.
That's a good question.
And I don't know how much they embalmed back
Yeah, I
then
don't
either.
know.
So yeah, that's a whole other deep dive.
Fun fact, I found out that this is my father-in-law's biggest fear.
Oh, really?
Yeah, being buried alive.
So we've got the story of the oblong box, where in the story a man murders his wife, preserves her in a box of salt, and has his servant pose as his wife. They needed to take the body with them aboard a ship, and so sailors believe that dead bodies on a ship are bad luck, and the only way they could hide her is if they put her in this box with salt. So this is actually based off an instance of the brother to the future Samuel Colt, who we know from Supernatural. And
His magical gun.
is probably the most famous revolver manufacturer,
Yeah.
Samuel
Yes.
Colt was. So his brother murdered a man over an unpaid bill, preserved his body in a box of salt, and shipped it to New Orleans.
Oh my. To do what?
I don't know.
Just sent it away.
Yeah, yeah. And so they
For
realized
somebody to find and be like, ah.
They realized he was gone, and then all of a sudden his body just shows up in New Orleans. It's like,
Oh my
yeah, I'll
gosh.
just send it
That's
down
so
there
weird.
to the bayou. Who knows?
I did not realize that was a story. There was a punk rock band here in Louisville back in the 90s called Oblong Box. They were really good.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
How interesting.
Yeah, I used to have their cassette tape. so dating myself.
Single.
Yeah,
At least it wasn't an 8-track.
I know, right? So I had their cassette tape, and it was in my car, and I had a wreck, and it like trashed it, and
Oh,
and you can't get it
no.
anymore. It really made me
I wonder if
sad.
they're
I
on
would be sad
Spotify.
about that too.
I tried to look.
Oh, bummer.
know.
So finally, we have the namesake of the show, The Fall of the House of Usher. Poe's story has one big thing in common with the show that I can't share because it's too much of a spoiler, but most believed it was based off James Campbell Usher and Agnes Pye Usher, who were the children of a close friend of Poe's mother, Eliza. And just like the story, the real Usher twins were believed to have gone insane. And I'll tell you what else happens in that story when we get to the final
there.
episode.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't want to ruin it for you or anyone
Yeah,
else that
I know.
hasn't watched it yet. But yeah, so 12 of his stories are based off real life events, which I thought was really kind of cool.
That is interesting. I didn't know that.
Well, and like that play too.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So the link is in our story notes. You can go read about the other 9 instances, but it's really interesting. Yeah, I'm sure you will.
And yet he was like calling Longfellow a plagiarizer.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think we all take inspiration from our
totally. I'm
surroundings,
not
right?
saying he plagiarized at all, but like it's just funny.
Yeah, he protests too much. Well, let's talk about our favorite tie-in to the original story.
Well, you go, Whit, because I know that you really loved looking into this one.
I really do. So my favorite tie-in to the original story is the reveal of Alessandra at the end of the episode with the device keeping her heart beating. I really love that for a couple of different reasons. So first of all, it stays true to the original story of a murder taking place and then being haunted by the victim's heartbeat. But also it ties in the fact that in the original Poe story, the narrator tells us the old man has done nothing wrong and they actually get along really well. He's like fabricated this reason to want to kill him, and that is the same thing that happens with Victorine and Alessandra, right? She didn't actually do anything wrong. She has been wronged by Victorine using her signature on fraudulent documents.
I put almost the same exact thing.
Yeah.
And I really loved how the narrator's madness coincides with the madness of Victorine in the show, right? But same thing, like Alexandra did nothing wrong.
She didn't do anything.
Kind of wrong place, wrong time, fell to someone's like violent woes, right? And then it was just over.
Like a fit of rage too.
And,
the same thing.
And same thing, Victorine thinks she's brilliant. And so like there's no way she could be mad or barreling down. Like she's like, well, I've got this covered. Don't worry about
I'm gonna have to take care of it.
Yeah.
And so my favorite tie-in with that scene is the original story. Poe's story ends with the narrator telling the police, rip open the floorboards and find the body. And he says the last words, there beats his hideous heart. And Mike Flanagan making the reveal of Alessandra's body so gory and hideous.
Yeah.
And her heart is, her chest is ripped open.
Doesn't Victorine go, oh, there she is?
Yeah. Like she forgot that she was there. She forgot what had happened.
Now.
Oh my gosh. I just thought that was so well done. And I was honestly really surprised that the device was in Alessandra's heart, because I always taught my students for the telltale heart that the heartbeat he's hearing is his own. That he's hearing his own heartbeat in his ears and just thinks it's
like guilt.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And so I was thinking about that and assuming that somehow Verna has gotten the device in Victorine's heart and that it was going to like explode or something like that. That's what I thought was going to happen. And so then I knew that she had killed Alessandra, so I wasn't surprised at that, but I was very surprised at the device because I thought for sure it was in Victorine somehow. Yeah. But then when you think about it with the original story, like that all makes total sense. So I thought that Victorine somehow had done it to herself, but I was like, oh,
yeah.
And the fact that she left her chest open and could just like see that poor, he's like, she is quite dead. Like,
I know.
Technically, it worked. Her heart was beating, but
it wasn't pumping any blood though.
No.
Oh my gosh, yeah. But I really loved that. Like, here beats the hideous heart. Like, you made that
pretty hideous.
Yeah, you made that really gory and like gross and bloody.
This show's really good, but this particular episode is my favorite episode.
Yeah, I thought it was really well done.
I think it really, the twists and turns and the tie-ins and this really
is a good one.
Stand out.
Yeah. What about you, Mindy? What was your favorite tie-in?
Well, mine was the whole chirping noise of the fake heart and then the beating of the heart that leads to the narrator and Poe's story and Victorine's like ultimate madness.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, did you notice in the opening scene and the closing scene?
I did.
It was the chirping noise.
Like she talked about last week.
When the credits come up, I was like, that's creepy.
But that's what I was talking about last week, that whatever it is that killed him is like highlighted in that first openings. Like that's how it opens in that house.
Sometimes it sucks being smart though, because it like spoils stuff.
I know, but I was excited though. It made me happy. I was like with Wit when it was like, the informant there was never an informant. I was like,
I knew it.
And I've seen this before, but I didn't remember that. So, but what I loved about that whole like madness of Victorine, she essentially becomes a mad scientist, right?
Yeah.
So much like these real life mad scientists that I found doing my very own research for this deep dive. There are a lot of these guys. So, and actually they
mad
are
scientists.
Yeah. And they're all guys that I've read about too, actually. So there's something for you. But there are a couple of links in the show notes that you can go to and see all of these plus some more. But I just pulled out the most interesting ones. So the first one's name is Vladimir Demikov. He is known for being a pioneer in organ transplantation, but he used dogs as his research subjects, which, like hurts my heart. So one day he decided he was going to just create a 2-headed dog. Google it at your own risk. It is quite disturbing. And unsurprisingly, this did not go well and produced like a monstrosity that died 4 days after the surgery.
Oh,
and even worse, Demikov only performed the surgery just to see if he could do it. It didn't really have it.
There was no purpose.
It didn't care if the dog died or anything.
No, there was
like
zero purpose for it. I just want to see if I could do it.
That sounds like the Island of Dr. Moreau. Like that story.
There's a really interesting horror book that uses dogs for scientific research like that by Katrina Ward called, oh God, I can't remember. It's Sundial.
Okay.
It's Sundial, Texas. And it's very much like a descent into madness, same type of thing.
Yeah.
You should read it. It's really good.
It was, seriously, like the dog, it was like a big dog and like a smaller dog, and then the smaller dog was like on the shoulder with just like one arm. It's very disturbing. So again, Google that at your own risk. And please,
I think I'm good.
Please use it incognito if you did, or you're going to get some weirdo shit coming up.
Oh yeah, your algorithm.
So the next one's name is Shiro Ishii, and he oversaw a thing called Unit 731, and this was a Japanese World War II government agency that specialized in biological and chemical warfare. So yeah, they used civilian test subjects and subjected them to disturbing tests, including frostbite experiments, intentional syphilis infection, amputation of arms, and then subsequent reattachment of them on the opposite side, and inducing gangrene in healthy body parts.
Oh.
Yeah.
Why?
Because they were testing it out to see what they could do as torture for World War II.
There's simpler ways to torture people. Christ.
The United States government do that?
The United States government has done a lot of shit.
Yeah.
I think they purposefully gave people syphilis didn't tell them.
Yes, they did.
And
they actually took, is it Henrietta Lacks? They took her cells after they cured her of syphilis and used it to create like vaccines and never told her.
Oh,
yeah, there's a whole book
we talked about this on an episode a long time ago.
Yeah. But, sorry, I interrupted you.
No, just, that was a little bit more morbid. I mean, they're all pretty morbid, but so this next dude's name is Ilya Ivanov, and he was a Russian scientist. He specialized in hybridization and artificial insemination.
Oh.
And he really pushed the boundaries of scientific experimentation, sometimes to really creepy extremes. Ugh. He was funded by the Russian state, and they wanted to create a super strong army to aid in their world domination.
Like Captain America?
Yes, but he attempted to create a human-ape hybrid in Africa and was fully funded for this. Thankfully, this project failed. Even though that one failed, many of his hybrids are actually successful. He invented the Z-Donk, which is a zebra-donkey hybrid, and the Zubron, a cow-bison hybrid. He also made a guinea pig rabbit, an antelope cow, and a mouse rat.
But why?
I don't know. But despite his other successes, the controversial human-ape experiments definitely overshadowed his other weird achievements and tarnished his reputation.
Yeah,
that literally sounds like Captain America. Yeah. Like from because they create
it's based off of that.
They create a super serum and give it to like a scrawny kid to make him into a super soldier. Like that's the whole point.
That's crazy.
That is bizarre.
Yeah, very bizarre. And I don't know why. Like, what was the purpose behind those? I guess. I mean, ultimately to see if they could create a super species, or I don't know, but
Mouse Rat is the name of Andy Dwyer's band in Parks and Rec.
Well, you've also got Dog Man, who's on Top's body.
The best police officer there is.
I remember when my son started reading that, I was like, what the fuck is this? Because it's not even like, oh, he's a dog man. It's like, no, the police officer died, but we put a dog on his body. Like, no problem.
It's really
and the
weird.
Kids are like, that's neat.
Yeah, let's read 15 books about it. Like, what? Sorry, tell me more.
Like, oh, let's look up mad scientists and see what we can do with that.
Tell me more about scary things that are going to give me nightmares.
Okay, just a few more. We have Dr. Robert Heath. He was at Tulane University, and he discovered that he could stimulate pleasure centers in the human brain using electrical stimulation and injecting acetylcholine straight into the brain.
Can I just have the electrodes?
Yeah.
Well, wait till you hear what happens. So with the chemical along with the electrodes, this caused a state of simulated, not actual, simulated bliss with repeated, very intense orgasms that could last up to 30 minutes.
Why aren't we doing this?
Thank you, doctor.
Like, so why did that not get further funding?
Well, you'll hear why in here in a second. So he also found that he could activate pain centers, which caused extreme suffering.
He ruined it.
And some speculate that Heath's work may have been connected to the CIA's MK Ultra project, which we know did experiments to look for ways to force confessions
I
out of
about
people.
That in season 2.
You did.
I take back my thank you to the doctor.
If we could just go back to the orgasms, please.
I don't know, a 30-minute orgasm, that sounds painful to me.
It sounds great to me.
I'm pretty sure that's on Grey's Anatomy.
Oh, really?
It, like spontaneous or like this spontaneous orgasms. And she's like, it's miserable.
Doctor, I just keep coming.
I mean, I'm almost positive that's an episode of Grey's Anatomy.
Also incognito.
Incognito mode.
Yeah, don't Google 30-minute orgasm.
Can you imagine what your algorithm would look like?
Yeah. It's already going to look weird from this. So the next one is William Buckland, and he was a brilliant but very eccentric scientist. He was a peer of Charles Darwin and the first to describe the Megalosaurus. Like, he was the first one to give a full picture of the dinosaur, the Megalosaurus. But he was probably more well known for his, let's just call it, adventurous palate.
Oh.
So this dude ate some weird shit, like including potted ostrich, roast hedgehog, panthers, puppies, garden moles, and sea slugs.
Supernatural did it.
And he was super proud of all this, right? But his most infamous culinary feat it outshone all his other scientific accomplishments, was when he was at a dinner party and someone started passing around the mummified heart of King Louis the 11th, because as you do, everybody's observing it. It's like the ushers, like, look at this really weird old artifact I have. And old Will just decided to take a bite. Yeah, what a fucking weirdo.
I wonder if he thought it would give him powers like that.
Maybe, yeah.
That is really... Can you imagine, like, being his friend at that dinner party?
That guy doesn't have friends.
Well, he didn't after that, for sure.
No, they invited him because he was weird and he did weird
that was
shit.
His frat brothers were like, eat it, eat it.
I'll give you $5.
I'll give you 10 gold doubloons if you take a bite out of that.
Sea slugs for life if you eat the heart. Oh my gosh, that's so weird.
He was probably the weirdest. But I wanted to end with Friedrich Nietzsche. He was a German philosopher who challenged traditional morality, religion, and philosophy.
We've talked about him a little bit, too.
Yeah, we'll talk to him just a little bit. His most famous declaration was God is Dead, which explored the consequences of a world without religious faith. But his other ideas included the will to power, which is a narcissistic way to rise to power, and the Übermensch, which I think is just hilarious, but it just basically means Superman, which were influential in existentialism and postmodernism. I mean, everybody's heard of him, right? So his writings remain very controversial to this day, and they continue to spark debate. But the reason I really wanted to include him in this list is because he also suffered from vascular dementia, like our man, Roderick Usher.
That explains a lot, actually.
Yeah. He was
just
super
that.
cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. So, yeah. Thought that was
Again, go watch the My Favorite Murder episode about him.
Yeah.
It's very interesting.
Well, thank you so much, Mindy. I like that.
I'm not going to sleep
vascular
tonight.
dementia tie-in.
I'm not going to eat dinner for a couple of nights either.
I know, right?
Just don't eat someone's heart.
Yeah.
Is there any
I'll try not
mummified
to.
heart in this? My episode MVP was Roderick, actually. I thought that not Tom Skerritt was really doing the work of all the different emotions and masks that Roderick has to wear, especially in this particular episode. He's talking to a basement wall at one point, which I feel very confident I know what that's about, but that's fine. He's trying to convince himself to die by suicide to save the rest of his kids and not being brave enough to do it. He's got the emotion in his scene at the end of the episode with Victorine. You've got the complete lack of normal emotion when he's talking to August, and that's a lot for an actor to do all in one episode. And I thought he did a really great job with the acting, and
why does he look so much like Tom Skerritt?
I don't know, but I wrote not Tom Skerritt is making it happen. But yeah, I thought he did a great job I really enjoy watching Roderick as a character. And I still there's a likability to him that I can't get away from, even though I know like I'm not supposed to like him, you know? I don't know exactly what it is.
Because you know how he was when he was
Maybe
younger.
that's what it is.
They've done a good job of making you sympathetic to him.
Yeah.
And he's a horrible person.
Yeah. And maybe part of that is just from the nature of it being from his perspective.
Right.
So,
and knowing he has dementia and he knows he's going to die and he knows his whole family's dying.
Yeah. It's like Freddie last week. Like, I know that I'm not supposed to like you, and I know that I'm going to find out more things that are going to make me not like you, but I kind of can't help but like you, you know?
I think, too, part of it is the juxtaposition with Madeline, because she is so vindictive and vicious and very, like, she's what you see is what you get. And, and very icy. And he almost seems more human next to her, even though he really has done exactly what she's been doing, right? He's just not as outward about it.
Maybe.
Well, it's funny you say that because she's my episode MVP.
Really?
And it's mostly for this quote. Smart girls are only sexy until you realize they don't want to fuck you.
I know. I love that.
I love when
that.
she's talking to Rufus and when he starts saying all that really awful stuff to her about like, hey, you can climb the ladder. Just give me a little fuck.
Climb me first. Yeah.
Right. She just smirks at him.
Yeah, she just gives him
like
shit-eating,
talking, you son of a bitch. Like you can tell she is going to fuck him up.
Like he's in her face and he wants her to like cry or whimper or like, and she just stares him down. Right. I love it.
I got the same vibes from her in that scene as in A Court of Mist and Fury when Nesta comes out of is going into the cauldron and she just points at the King of Highburn and everyone's like, oh shit. Like that's how I felt about Madeline. Yeah, that's exactly how I felt about Madeline in that scene.
Yeah.
But who was your MVP, Mindy?
Mine was Karma. I mean, act like a psycho, Victorine, and try to push your research before it's ready and probably end up killing people. Karma turns you into a psycho and makes you kill yourself.
Karma is my boyfriend. Yeah, that is pretty much exactly what happened. Well, it's funny that Madeline is your favorite character MVP because it was my favorite secondary character.
Oh, yeah?
Well, she is involving herself in every single facet of the family, ultimately to help Roderick, right? She's checking in with Victorine about the trial for Roderick. She's telling Arthur Pym to have Verna killed and send her the eyeballs as a receipt.
I know.
Which I was like, oh my, dang. But she's doing that to protect Roderick, right? And 1970s Madeline is really holding her own in that horrible meeting with Rufus, and the only reason she's there doing that is for Roderick, right? And I've said before, she's got this loyalty to him. I don't know. I kind of like that about her.
There is something about the eyes, though, that I just thought about when you said that. You know, they say they're like the window to the soul, and her whole thing is building an algorithm so someone can like live forever. Yeah. I wonder if there's a specific reason she wants the eyes.
Yeah, maybe. I thought it was just like cold. But
maybe.
Thinking about her loyalty to Roderick and how she's like trying to protect him, when Verna asks her at the New Year's Eve bar scene, what do you want out of your life? One of the things that she says is to never let a man have power over her. But doesn't Roderick have power over her because of her love for him and loyalty to him?
I mean, I would say she has as much power over him, though.
Maybe.
Yeah.
But I just think that's interesting.
I also don't think she sees Roderick as a man.
See him as a lover.
Unfortunately.
I do. I don't think she sees him as human. Like I almost think like he's her pawn, her puppet.
He's like a completely separate entity.
Yeah. I mean, she is the puppet master of this whole thing.
Yeah, that's true.
So,
but yeah, I like her. I like watching her.
Yes.
I
don't want to be around her.
No.
Yeah, don't put me in a room.
Yeah,
and I don't want to be on her
me.
bad side either.
Oh my gosh, no. I'd lose
like
my eyeballs. Yeah.
I like my eyes.
Yeah, no thanks. Who are your favorite secondary characters?
Mine was Allie, Victorine's girlfriend.
Yeah.
I just love that she basically called Vic and her crazy family out. She was trying to get out before she was in too deep, and like she realized it, and she was like, peace out. Like I'm not playing these games. Like I love the lines that she said, like you're not. She like goes up to her so lovingly and puts her hands like around like by her face, and it looks like she's just gonna be like say something super loving, and she says, you're not who I thought you were. And then when she's leaving, she says, you ushers, you're all fucking monsters.
Yeah.
Like she is saying what all of us are thinking.
Right. Her eyes have been opened.
Yes.
She was also my favorite secondary character for Also because she's just an amazing actress.
Yeah.
So the
really
scene
good.
where she's been bludgeoned, the sound she's making and the way her eyes are fluttering is probably like some of the most disturbing like 10 seconds of television.
Yeah, it was
like,
hard to watch.
It was really scary watching that. And I'm like, and you're like, oh, that is actually a person doing that.
Right.
It's not like CGI or anything like that. Yeah. And, you know, like you said earlier, when she's in the room and she's up against the wall with the, I guess I'm going to call it a pacemaker, but, you know, like, and she looks so gory and how still she is. But one of the reasons I really liked her is because of what you said too about all the ushers being monsters. And it did make me wonder about actual criminals who haven't been brought to justice. So I want to tell you like a few short stories, a couple that like I've never heard of. Okay. So first let's start with this serial killer Bella Kiss. Have you ever heard of this guy?
No.
Whit?
I feel like I have, but
This
maybe
is a
not.
man who would post ads in the... Okay, so first of all, let me start with his wife. He figured out was having an affair with another man, right? And they go missing. So that's how this all starts.
The wife and the boyfriend?
Yes. So Bella starts posting ads in the newspaper in the late 1800s saying he was a widower looking for a wife. Women would respond, but after a month or two, they all seemed to disappear.
Oh, no.
A neighbor became suspicious about the number of barrels the man had on his land, but he explained it away as hoarding gasoline as a precious commodity before the impending war. And the cops were like, well, yeah, we're all storing gasoline because war is coming, right? So, of course, when he was shipped off to war himself, he disappeared. And the local authorities went to get the precious gasoline from his land.
Oh, no.
And when they opened the barrels, they found 24 mutilated bodies.
Oh, my gosh.
All of which had been strangled. 23 women, 1 man. Right?
Wow.
So reports of sightings of Bella came from New York, where he was suspected to be working as a janitor, but when officers were dispatched to apprehend him, he had simply disappeared.
Ugh.
He was never arrested.
Ugh.
But people are very certain he survived the war.
Ugh.
Yeah. So next we
At
have a
least
man.
that was long enough ago that he's dead.
I know,
right?
Yeah, this was in the 1800s. So next we have a man who is suspected to be still alive today and continues to be on the FBI's most wanted list. Victor Guerrera was a Wells Fargo employee who was recruited by a militant group that wanted independence for Puerto Rico. Using his expertise with armored cars, he was able to pull off the biggest heist in American history, getting away with $7 million in cash. He's never been caught, even though part of the militia that recruited him served time up until 2004.
Oh, wow.
They didn't give him up?
No, they didn't give him. Well, they did.
But then they couldn't find him.
Okay.
Yeah.
So he is suspected to still be alive somewhere. And speaking of money, let's talk about the $350 million that John Rufo fraudulently schemed banks out of in the 1990s. He would simply walk into banks as a researcher for Philip Morris. He claimed that they were trying to develop a smoke-free cigarette, but that the project needed money to store their research on computers. Rufo was caught and sentenced, but on the day he was supposed to start in his incarceration, he never showed up and his car was found at the airport. It's assumed that John is probably living quite the life somewhere overseas.
Well, yeah, with $350 million.
Right.
Wow.
So there's a lot of stories like this, and I've linked the
Wow.
article where I found this info. It's from listserv.com. It's all in the show notes, but there's tons of stories like this where people got away because they just kind of like disappeared. But there's sightings and stuff of them. Like people are fairly certain they're alive, but they're just like, well, see ya, peace. I'm in, Switzerland or whatever.
I wonder what the most recent one of those is, because I feel like with technology and stuff, it's a lot harder to just like peace out and disappear.
The most recent one of the 3 that I talked about is the one that the guy that stole $7 million, because the guys from Puerto Rico just got out of prison 20 years ago.
That's really interesting.
But yeah, so 2 of these were from the 90s, and then the serial killer was from the 1800s.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's crazy to think that just in the 90s.
Right. That's not really that long ago.
Right. But now there's a footprint for everything. They would have called Wells Fargo. They would have like...
Oh, yeah.
Well, and even post 9/11, the security at airports is completely different than it was in the 90s. So...
Right, yeah. I remember pre 9/11, I could walk people to the gate and like hang out with them until their plane took off.
Yep.
It was actually kind of nice.
It was kind of nice.
Thanks for fucking everything up, people.
Those were the days. The days at the airport. So that brings us to questions that we need resolved, which I feel like there are probably a lot. one of my questions was what I said earlier. Is Verna a Crowley type character? Did Madeline kissing her?
I like that. And that connection.
I do too.
Yeah, that very much felt like, you've told me what it is that you want. Now we shall seal it with a kiss. Like, that's what it felt like to me.
So speaking of kisses, like, why in the world is Roderick kissing another woman?
Yeah,
he's married.
I was confused about that, and
because she told him to, and he's her bitch.
Right. Well, that's what I was a little bit confused if he was still married to Annabelle at that point, but I think he was, based on what August said. But yeah, and the only other question that I have is, does anyone in this show have any actual genuine feelings for anyone besides themselves? Because
August does.
We see them, we see some shows of emotion that I'm like, I feel like there's just as much evidence that you could say, of course, they only care about themselves, or you could also say, well, no, I think they have a little bit of caring for this person or that person. You know what I mean? Yeah. And it's just an interesting question to me.
Does.
Well, it's the sociopath, psychopath thing, right? Like, they're all sociopaths.
Well, yeah, that is true. But yeah, it's just that thing of like, they're obviously bad people doing bad things, but that doesn't mean that they are soulless and have no feelings for anybody. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's just maybe an unanswerable question, but I just am curious about that. Those were my only questions for today.
I want to know why Roderick insists that he and Madeline can never discuss New Year's Eve, and like, what are they setting their alibi up for?
Yeah.
Like, what are they doing?
He was like, how dare you bring this up to me, woman?
You said we'd never discuss this.
Yeah. I was like, okay.
And so one thing I noticed too is, who was outside Tam's door with the bodyguard when she opened the door? Who was that?
I assumed that it was Verna.
I assumed it was Verna, and she was like getting out of the way.
But someone like skirted away really fast.
Yeah,
right?
no, I assumed that it was Verna.
Yeah, that was kind of a weird
But
thing.
I also assumed that the bodyguard didn't actually see her.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And then finally, and you kind of brought this up, Whitney, but why is Roderick keep talking to the wall?
That was my question too.
Right.
I have theories, but I won't say. But I do have theories. Yeah. What are your questions, Mindy?
That mine was just, why does Roderick keep talking to that wall? It just is weird.
Yeah.
But we did hear the jester jingle again.
Yeah.
And he saw him in I forgot about that. He sees him up in
the joint funeral
at the joint
thing.
Funeral,
I noticed
where he
that
saw.
too.
Oh, he does?
Where he saw Vern or the Raven up in the balcony.
Oh, I
He
didn't
looks back
catch
and
that.
it's the jester. Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to know what's going to happen to Lenore, because she's literally the only sane person in this family.
Yeah.
She's the only innocent one.
And you see they're all dying. You know they're all going to die. I mean, we know this from the beginning, that all the siblings are going to die. Like, what is her fate? If she's going to die, why is it? Why is the innocent one dying? If she's not going to die, why? Like, I'm just curious to see how. I mean, because we know all the kids are going to die,
Right.
So, and we don't know at this point what's going to happen to Morella.
Mm-hmm.
That was one of mine too. So I want to find out, much to what you said about Lenore, I want to find out what happens to Maury, and I want to find out what happened to Annabelle.
Oh yeah, I want to know what happened to Annabelle too. I don't know, to be honest with you. I just
she's definitely not around.
When she's like, when all the other like wives are there at the funeral and stuff, like she's not there. Even though Tam and Froderick are still alive, which are her kids. But it's kind of weird that she is just like not there all of a sudden.
Yeah, I think it was this episode. Somebody makes a comment about Tamerlane and Freddie, like, yeah, you grew up in the house with the perfect Annabelle,
right?
And I was like,
Victorine said that in the bar.
I thought that was this episode.
Annabelle was perfect.
She was
great.
She was too good for this
she's
world.
super cute and crunchy. I like her.
She is very cute. Yeah, my only looking forward to is just continuing to unravel the story, right? Of like how Verna, the New Year's Eve bar, the basement, and all that, like how it all ties together, because I know that it does, because of the way that they're like interspersing all of these different flashbacks and stuff. So just seeing the whole thing come together is what I'm excited about. So, did you say what you were looking forward to, Minnie?
About Lenore and.
Whitney can't remember shit.
I really can't. Sorry.
She had one sip of vodka.
You said yours too, right? Did everybody take their turn? So sorry. Well, is there anything else that we want to talk about the episode before we talk about our nerdiest things
of the week? An intense episode.
It really was. Yeah. These are not happy, uplifting episodes.
There were like 10 more things I wanted to talk about. But.
I know, there's a lot. Well, who wants to go first to talk about the nerdiest thing in the week?
Well, I'd like to hear yours.
Well, I got a lovely Christmas holiday card from the wonderful friend of podcast, Ellery Douglas.
Right. What is her slogan right now? Horny, happy ending?
Something like that.
That's great.
I love it.
Yeah, she
Wholesome, horny, happy endings.
Yeah, she sent a Christmas card, and I got it this week, which is Valentine's Day. But she sent it to, she sent up several stickers, for all three of us. I gave you guys the ones that are boobs. She sent me a couple of...
Even though Whitney's the one with the boobs.
Well, because I know my kids will find it, and I just, they're too young to have...
I hope my kids find mine.
Boobs.
Whitney's like, no, I don't have those because I have tits.
Get it right. But no, she sent some really cool fan art from her book, A Better Proposal, and she sent some cool little bookmarks too for a lucky shot and A Better Proposal.
I really like her.
I know, I do too. Yeah. I love. Shout out to Ellery Douglas. But that was really exciting, fun little surprise. I didn't expect to get a holiday card this week, so
on
it was
Valentine's
nice.
Day week.
Yeah. What about you guys, Mindy? What's your nerdiest thing of the week?
So we've talked about this movie before. It's still in my top 10 movies of all time. It's very sappy, but I today found out that on Disney Plus, Wild Hearts Can't Be Broken.
What?
It is on Disney Plus.
So I watched it this morning. I definitely cried, and then I immediately researched Sonora Webster Carver's life and found out that she has an autobiography, and I bought it on Kindle for 99 cents.
Oh,
nice!
Yes.
I'm so excited to read it.
Does the movie hold up?
Yes.
Okay.
It's the guy from 16 Candles.
It is
isn't
the guy from
Yeah,
16 Candles, and Gabrielle Anwar. Yes.
Yeah.
I always loved her.
Yeah, we watched that.
I think
movie
she's
all
a very
the time.
underrated actress.
Yeah, we watched that all the time growing up.
Yeah.
Because, we weren't allowed to watch a lot of things, but we were allowed to watch
We're allowed
Wild
to
Hearts
watch
Can't
that
Be
at
Broken.
school on videotape day.
Ooh.
It is literally one of my favorite all-time movies. I always remember it, and I don't know how it came up or what I saw, but I found out it was on Disney Plus, and I was like,
Well, that's exciting. Yes. Thank you so much. You've given me something to watch this week, too. And lots of things to read from both of you. All these show note article links.
Right? So I worked a Valentine's market on Saturday, and I was so exhausted when it was over. I got home at 7:30 and didn't leave my bed until noon the next day.
oh my gosh.
But I sat in bed and watched 3 episodes of SNL, which I love SNL.
I do too.
I grew up with it. I feel like in the 90s is when it was at its peak, and it's kind of peaking again, I feel like.
It is pretty funny.
But I love it. It's very nostalgic for me. But I can't stop thinking about Sarah Sherman, who portrayed the original Nosferatu on Weekend Update. Did you see this, Whitney?
Yes.
Okay. She goes on about how the new Nosferatu has killer abs, but the only crunch that vampires ever do are the ones where they go straight back when they go from lying in the coffin to raising back up. And it reminded me of when we were at Imaginarium.
Yes.
And what is that trope called?
Oh, gosh. I don't know.
I can never remember
We're
it.
going to have to ask Diantha and Nadej what it is.
what they called it.
There is a trope, you guys, where the vampire, arms across its chest, goes from, they're stiff as a board, goes from laying down to sitting back up.
Yeah.
And so Sarah Sherman keeps doing an impression of it, and it's so fucking funny.
She is one of my favorites on the cast right now.
And so I was like, I remember that little trope. If we can figure it out, we'll put it in the show notes. But
it was a weird name that didn't. That's not what you would have
rise
thought it
to
was.
the occasion.
Something
like that.
I can't remember what the title was.
We'll find out for you guys.
That's it for today's episode. Next week, we are discussing The Fall of the House of Usher, episode 6, Goldbug, and Edgar Allan Poe's short story of the same name. See you then.
Bye.
Bye.
Like what you heard in this episode? Follow Our Nerdiest Thing on Instagram at instagram.com/Our Nerdiest Thing or Facebook at facebook.com/Our Nerdiest Thing. We love hearing from fellow nerds. Email us at ournerdiestthing@gmail.com.